The morning begins at Logan International Airport in Boston. It's just after sunrise, a normal, quiet Tuesday. American Airlines Flight 11 is already taxiing towards the runway, preparing for its journey to Los Angeles. At this point, no one on the ground, no controller in the tower, and no pilot in the sky has any idea what was about to unfold. At 7:59 a.m. Eastern Time, Flight 11 takes off with 92 people on board, and for the first few minutes of its journey, nothing seemed unusual. The aircraft climbed smoothly, contacted air traffic control as expected, and joined the busy flow of traffic leaving the northeast corridor. Then, at 8:14 a.m., something changed. Flight 11 failed to respond to a routine instruction from Boston Center.
American 11, Boston. American 11, if you hear Boston Center, ident.
Controllers tried again, but the aircraft remained silent.
American 11, if you hear Boston Center, ident, please, or acknowledge.
Pilots do miss radio calls from time to time, but this silence felt different.
This is Adam. This is Boston. I tried American 20 left and I was going to climb. He will not respond to me now.
Looks like he's turning right.
Yeah, I turned him 20 right.
Oh, okay.
And he's only going to, I think, 29.
5 minutes later, at 8:19 a.m., the first unmistakable confirmation of trouble came from inside the plane. Flight attendant Betty Ong, speaking with remarkable calm, reached American Airlines operations from a seatback phone.
The cockpit's not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class. And I think there's mates that we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked.
Shortly afterward, the plane's transponder was switched off. The identifying data that normally shows altitude and flight number vanished from radar screens, leaving controllers with only a raw, unlabeled return drifting southwest. As they tried to track the ghost-like blip, an unexpected voice suddenly broke through the radio at 8:24 a.m.
Is that American 11 trying to call?
Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're heading to the airport.
It was not a pilot. A hijacker had accidentally transmitted a message meant for the cabin. This was Mohammed Atta, who later turned out to be the ringleader of the attacks. With Betty Ong's call ongoing, which lasted for about 25 minutes, the evidence was now undeniable. American Airlines Flight 11 was in the hands of hijackers, and in the minutes that followed, the entire US airspace system would begin facing decisions and events unlike anything it had ever experienced. By 8:25 a.m., Boston Center had gathered enough evidence to alert the wider aviation system. Controllers informed their supervisors that Flight 11 was almost certainly hijacked. They attempted once more to reach the cockpit, calling repeatedly, hoping for any response at all. At the same time, they were listening to Betty Ong's call relayed through American Airlines, learning about the violence unfolding on board. The situation escalated quickly. Supervisors at Boston Center contacted the FAA Command Center in Herndon, Virginia, reporting a confirmed hijacking in progress. The FAA began forwarding the information to other regional centers, instructing them to watch for irregularities on nearby aircraft. In these early minutes, the uncertainty was overwhelming. No one knew whether this was a single isolated event or something far larger. At 8:32 a.m., another concerning detail emerged. Controllers noticed that Flight 11 had begun turning sharply to the south, away from its original route to Los Angeles. The turn was deliberate and coordinated. This confirmed what the hijacker's radio transmission had suggested. Someone in the cockpit was steering the aircraft. The FAA, now fully aware of the gravity of the situation, relayed the information to the military. At 8:34 a.m., Boston Center reached out to Northeast Air Defense Sector, NEADS, urgently requesting fighter support.
Hi, Boston Center Team U. We have a problem here. We have a hijacked aircraft headed towards New York, and we need someone to scramble some F-16s or something up there to help us out.
Is this real world or exercise?
No, this is not an exercise manifest.
Okay, hey, hold on 1 second, okay?
Yep.
Inside the NEADS command center, the call from Boston Center set off an immediate reaction. Controllers at NEADS moved quickly, ordering F-15 fighter jets at Otis Air National Guard Base in Massachusetts to prepare for launch.
Hey.
But despite the urgency, the military faced a major problem. No one knew exactly where Flight 11 was. With the transponder off, radar data was limited and inconsistent. Controllers struggled to pinpoint its precise location. While they attempted to make sense of the fading blip, the fighters waited for final authorization to take off. At 8:46 a.m., the F-15s were moments from launch. But just before they lifted into the air, the unthinkable happened. Flight 11, invisible to most radar and unresponsive for over 30 minutes, descended rapidly over Manhattan at terrific speed of 590 miles per hour and crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
You're looking at the World Trade Center. We understand that a plane has crashed into the World Trade Center. We don't know anything more than that. We don't know if it was a commercial aircraft. We don't know if it was a private aircraft. We have no idea how many were on board or what the extent of the injuries are right now.
For a brief moment, no one understood what they were seeing. Reports varied wildly. A small plane, an accident, a navigation error. But for the FAA and the military, the truth was immediate and unmistakable. The hijacked Flight 11 had reached its destination, and the morning was only beginning. As the first F-15 scrambled toward Flight 11, the nation's attention was still focused on the chaotic airspace over New York. Then at 8:42 a.m., a second aircraft, United Airlines Flight 175, which had also departed Logan Airport at 8:14 a.m., became unresponsive. The first operational evidence that something was abnormal on United 175 came at 8:47, when the aircraft changed beacon codes twice within a minute. At 8:51, Flight 175 had deviated sharply from its assigned route, climbing and turning its ways that made it immediately suspicious to Boston Center and FAA supervisors. The confirmation of a second hijacking intensified the urgency. NEADS, already scrambling fighters toward Flight 11's last known position, now had to deal with another rogue aircraft heading straight for Manhattan. Fighter jets were dispatched to intercept the hijacked Flight 175, but critical delays occurred because the aircraft was not transmitting its location via transponder, making it difficult to pinpoint on radar and track in real time. Controllers had to watch helplessly as the aircraft closed in on its target. At 9:03 a.m., Flight 175, with 65 people on board, slammed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, confirming the unimaginable reality. The United States was under simultaneous aerial attack, and the crisis gripping the first flight had just multiplied. The impact of Flight 175 into the South Tower sent shockwaves through the entire aviation system. For the first time in US history, the FAA faced an unprecedented decision: how to secure the skies when multiple aircrafts were hijacked and already on course for destruction. A few minutes later at 9:06 a.m., the agency issued a nationwide ground stop, ordering that no plane in the United States be allowed to take off. This directive applied to thousands of commercial flights, private jets, and even small general aviation aircraft. Runways across the country froze, towers went silent, and controllers shifted entirely from routine operations to emergency management. While the nation struggled to comprehend the attacks unfolding in New York, a third aircraft, American Airlines Flight 77, carrying 64 people, was already in trouble. Departing Washington Dulles Airport at 8:20 a.m., the flight climbed normally before becoming unresponsive to routine radio calls. At 8:54 a.m., the aircraft deviated from its assigned route, turning south. 2 minutes later, its transponder was switched off, making the aircraft significantly harder to track. By 9 a.m., even primary radar contact had been lost. Controllers at the Indianapolis Air Traffic Control Center repeatedly attempted to reach the flight, but all calls went unanswered.
American 77, Indy. American 77, American, Indy. American 77, American, Indy, radio check, how do you read? American 77, American, radio check, how do you read?
Believing the aircraft might have crashed, Indianapolis Center did not immediately suspect hijacking and therefore did not notify the FAA hijack coordinator or NORAD during this critical window. As the minutes passed, scattering reports began to surface, NEADS receiving confusing and incomplete information. First, that Flight 77 was missing, and then that an unidentified fast-moving aircraft was heading toward Washington, D.C. Despite never receiving an official hijack notification for the flight, NEADS scrambled 2 F-16s from Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. But as the earlier hijackings, radar limitations, communication gaps, and initial wrong vectors slowed the response. The fighters flew east over the Atlantic Ocean instead of heading to Washington, D.C., unaware that the threat was already closing in. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon, confirming that the attacks were now targeting both symbolic and strategic centers of US power. America's airspace had become a battlefield of confusion. Hijacked aircraft, delayed warnings, scrambling fighters, and emergency directives converging in ways no one had ever imagined. As the attacks unfolded, President George W. Bush was in Sarasota, Florida, Visiting Emma E. Booker Elementary School, he had come to promote his administration's education initiative, No Child Left Behind, and planned to read with a classroom of second-grade students. At 8:46 a.m., before entering the classroom, Bush was told that a small plane had hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Details were unclear, and the event seemed at first like a tragic accident. At 9:03 a.m., as he sat in front of the children, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower. Moments later, White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card leaned down and quietly delivered the now famous message: "A second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack." At 9:34 a.m., after a brief improvised statement to the reporters, Bush left the school and entered his motorcade, heading to Sarasota Bradenton International Airport. En route, he received yet another devastating update. The Pentagon had been hit. American Airlines Flight 77 had struck the nation's military headquarters at 9:37 a.m., confirming that the attacks were broader and more coordinated than anyone realized. When President Bush boarded Air Force One, the original plan had been to return directly to Washington. But by the time the aircraft lifted off at 9:55 a.m., the situation had changed dramatically. The Secret Service, the president's senior advisors, and Vice President Cheney were all urging him not to fly back to the Capitol, fearing Washington itself could still be a target. Reluctantly, the president agreed. At approximately 10:10 a.m., Air Force One veered west, abandoning the route to Washington and beginning a search for a secure alternative. The immediate priority was to locate a safe base, close enough to reach quickly, where the president could land, refuel, deliver a statement to the nation, and give the Secret Service time to organize and secure everyone traveling with the president. During the flight, the president's military aide and an Air Force officer quickly evaluated possible locations. Around 10:20 a.m., Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana was identified as the best interim destination. Secure, distant from potential threats, and equipped to handle both communications demand and the heightened security posture of that day. At this point, the focus returns to the unfolding crisis in the morning skies over the United States, where air traffic control centers and military operations struggled to manage the chaos caused by the hijacked flights. After Flight 77 struck the Pentagon at 9:37 a.m., the airspace over Washington, D.C. immediately became one of the most tightly controlled air zones in the country. Military authorities established an instant no-fly zone, forbidding any civilian aircraft from entering the area. Fighter jets patrolled the skies over the Capitol, authorized to take defensive action against any plane that appeared to pose a threat. These measures marked an unprecedented step in domestic air defense. The combination of restricted airspace, armed escorts, and continuous monitoring reflected the urgency and gravity of the situation. For the first time in US history, the nation's most sensitive airspace was effectively on lockdown, with military personnel ready to respond to any perceived threat within minutes. By 9:42 a.m., the FAA made an unprecedented decision. Every aircraft in US airspace was ordered to land immediately. This directive affected thousands of commercial flights, private planes, helicopters, and even small general aviation aircraft. Controllers worked urgently to direct pilots to the nearest suitable airports while coordinating with airports suddenly flooded with incoming flights. Within just 2 hours, more than 4,500 planes had safely touched down, marking the largest and fastest grounding of aircraft in history. The nationwide order not only ensured the safety of passengers and crew, but also cleared the skies for military operations and emergency response. What had begun as isolated hijackings had transformed into a total disruption of the nation's airspace. With all US airspace grounded, attention quickly turned to transatlantic flights still en route to the United States. Canada implemented Operation Yellow Ribbon, an emergency plan to handle inbound aircraft during crises. Over 200 flights that would have landed in New York, Boston, and other US airports were diverted to Canadian airfields, including Gander, Halifax, Montreal, and Vancouver. Small towns like Gander suddenly found themselves hosting thousands of stranded passengers. Airports and communities mobilized rapidly to provide food, shelter, and care, turning remote locations into temporary hubs for international travelers. The operation highlighted the cooperation between the United States and Canada during the emergency, and it ensured that potentially vulnerable aircraft were safely on the ground. While the skies over America remained empty, Canadian airspace became a lifeline for flights caught in the unprecedented crisis. While the nation was still absorbing the attacks on New York and the Pentagon, United Airlines Flight 93 became the fourth hijacked aircraft of the morning. Departing from Newark, New Jersey at 8:42 a.m. with 44 people on board, the flight soon stopped responding to air traffic control. Passengers and crew realized what was happening and quickly organized to resist the hijackers. Meanwhile, the military scrambled 2 unarmed F-16 fighter jets from Andrews Air Force Base. With no missiles on board due to the short notice, their only option, if necessary, was to ram the hijacked plane to prevent further devastation. As the passengers attempted to regain control, Flight 93 crashed in a field in Pennsylvania at 10:03 a.m. Their courage likely prevented the plane from reaching its intended target, believed to be the US Capitol or the White House. The events of Flight 93 demonstrated both the bravery of ordinary civilians and the extreme measures the military was prepared to take to protect the nation's most sensitive locations. Amid the chaos of the confirmed hijackings, air traffic controllers began receiving reports of numerous other suspicious aircraft. Over the course of the next hour, up to 11 potential hijackings were flagged across the country. Many were later determined to be false alarms caused by pilots clocking the wrong transponder codes, miscommunication, or minor deviations from assigned flight paths. For example, a Korean air flight inadvertently transmitted the hijack code, and a Delta flight appeared to be heading toward Washington, D.C. A private Learjet also flew unresponsive for several miles, triggering alerts. Each report forced military and FAA personnel to scramble resources, tracking planes that ultimately posed no threat. These false alarms, while not dangerous themselves, amplified the tension and confusion in the airspace, illustrating just how fragile the national aviation system was under pressure and how quickly the events of that morning had escalated beyond anyone's expectations. In the midst of widespread confusion and multiple hijack alerts, the government took an unprecedented step. Vice President Dick Cheney, operating from the Presidential Emergency Operations Center beneath the White House, authorized the military to shoot down any commercial aircraft deemed a threat to national security. This directive applied to planes that were unresponsive, deviating from flight paths, or suspected of carrying hijackers. The order underscored the extreme measures the nation was prepared to take to prevent further attacks. Fighter pilots were now operating under rules of engagement never before applied to domestic flights, ready to intercept and, if necessary, destroy aircraft to protect major population centers. For the first time, American skies were effectively a battlefield, and every flight in the air had the potential to become a target. This authorization, while never fully enacted, highlighted the gravity of the crisis and the extraordinary pressure on both civilian and military aviation personnel that morning. By 1:15 noon, the FAA had completely closed US airspace, an unprecedented move in the nation's history. No aircraft was allowed to take off, and all flights already airborne had landed at the nearest suitable airports. This action affected thousands of commercial, private, and general aviation planes, effectively emptying the skies of the continental United States. Meanwhile, Air Force One, which had earlier departed Florida along a random route to Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, continued its protective maneuvers. After a brief stop at Barksdale, where also Bush made his first formal televised statement of the day, the aircraft departed around 1:45 p.m., flying entirely alone through empty U.S. airspace toward Offutt Air Base in Nebraska, home of U.S. Strategic Command and one of the most secure underground bunkers and advanced communications hubs in the nation. There, Bush held a full national security meeting via secure video link as the country's airspace was locked down for the first time in history. At approximately 4:30 p.m., once its mission at Offutt was complete, Air Force One departed for Joint Base Andrews near Washington, D.C., arriving that evening around 6:54 p.m. From there, Bush was flown by Marine One to the White House, where the nation awaited his address. The carefully controlled movements of Air Force One highlighted the extraordinary measures taken to protect the commander-in-chief while the nation's airspace remained in a historic state of lockdown. The attacks of September 11, 2001 left an indelible mark on the United States and the world, fundamentally transforming the way air travel and national security are managed. In the immediate aftermath, the FAA and military re-evaluated procedures for hijacking detection, emergency response, and communication between agencies. Airspace control became far stricter, with permanent protocols to ground flights, establish no-fly zones, and scramble fighter jets in the event of suspected threats. The creation of the Transportation Security Administration, or TSA, and the implementation of reinforced cockpit doors, passenger screening, and standardized protocols for in-flight security reflect a new era of vigilance. Airlines and military operations were forever altered, learning to operate in a system where the possibility of domestic aerial threats is taken as seriously as any external attack. Even 2 decades later, the legacy of 9/11 remains evident every time a plane takes off. Air traffic control is more tightly coordinated, security procedures are far more strict, and the military maintains rapid response capabilities for potential airborne threats. The skies over America, once taken for granted as safe and open, are now a constant testament to the lessons learned from one of the most catastrophic days in history. Thank you for watching.